today's webinar on tree work. My name is Michael Tilden and I'm an inspector from SafeWork New South Wales, and I'll be your presenter today. Today's session aims to identify common terms used which we'll hear throughout the webinar, the legislation used in New South Wales, statistics on the industry, how to identify hazards and take steps to eliminate or minimise the risks. We will cover some industry examples and we'll briefly discuss workers' compensation. Some of the common terms you'll hear me mention in today's webinar are PCBU. This is a person who conducts a business or undertaking, either on their own or with others, whether for profit or not for profit. A PCBU is a business owner or operator. A hazard is anything in the workplace that has the potential to harm workers or people. Hazards can include plant and equipment, falling objects, the tree itself, traffic, or power lines. A risk is the chance or probability that a person will be harmed. Reasonably practicable is a term used in the Work Health and Safety Act and means that when a hazard has been identified, what can be reasonably done by the PCBU to eliminate or minimise the risks, taking into account the likelihood of the hazard or risk occurring, the degree of harm from the hazard or risk, knowledge about ways of eliminating or minimising the hazard or risk, the availability, suitability and costs of ways to eliminate or minimise the risk. There are various things a PCBU must do to eliminate risks or manage those risks so far as is reasonably practicable in a workplace. This is to ensure the health and safety of workers and others who are affected by the tree work your business conducts. Codes of practice, guidance documents and standards assist a PCBU in determining what is reasonably practicable and can assist with complying with the legislation. We'll touch on some examples which may assist you with compliance during this webinar. To highlight to you the number of fatal, serious and dangerous incidents notified and responded to by SafeWork New South Wales from 2013 to June 2016. The column on the left of this chart is the total number of incidents from 0 to 8, and the numbers below are the years. You can see that in 2015 there were 7 serious incidents, and these would have resulted in the worker being unable to work for a significant amount of time, or they were unable to return back to their normal duties. The biggest cause of fatal injuries have been workers being struck by falling objects whilst felling trees. The biggest cause of serious injuries were tree climbers falling from a height. Let's look at some ways to help stop people being injured or killed. Before conducting any work, it's important to identify the hazards and the types of things that can cause harm. This can be done during the quotation stage or prior to the work crew starting at the work site. For example, you need to identify electrical hazards, traffic, falls from height, structurally unsound trees, entanglement with plant such as wood chippers and stump grinders, debris, falling from height or underground services. Once you have assessed the hazards, you need to look at ways in which you can ideally eliminate the risks, and if the risks cannot be eliminated, you must manage those risks so far as is reasonably practicable. There are various ways to do this, and I'll go through step by step with you and use industry examples during the webinar to explain how this works. You submit a quote for the removal of a dead tree which has visual signs of decay and splitting. These are a hazard. There are also fixed targets in all directions from the tree. The risks are the tree structure might fail or the tree could hit a target when being felled. The available controls are a flat site, EWP access and crane access. You win the job and the price you have quoted, being $1,000, doesn't allow for the hire of additional equipment. You choose to use a climber supported by 2 ground workers to dismantle the tree manually. The climber is sent to the site with climbing equipment and uses a double rope climbing system as per the work instructions. The climber starts to remove the tree and lowers a branch as it's close to a fence, and the climber's lifeline anchor point fails, causing them to fall from a height of approximately 10 metres. Using the principles of reasonably practicable and the hierarchy of control, the risk being falls from height could not be eliminated, as the tree could not be felled, which is the first step in the hierarchy of control. You must then consider other methods to remove the tree, which requires a worker to work at height. In doing so, you must minimise the risks of a worker falling from height so far as reasonably practicable, which in this example could have been done by the use of an EWP. To explain further, the hierarchy of control works from the highest level of controlling risks to the lowest level. For example, if you cannot eliminate the risk in the first instance, you must substitute the hazard with something that gives a lesser risk, such as chainsaw with a hand pruning saw in some situations. Isolate the hazard from a person being exposed to it. Power outage whilst the tree removal is being conducted. Implementing engineering controls, such as an elevated work platform, excavator, crane or HIAB. If the risks still remain, you can implement administrative controls, such as a procedure, safe work method statement, and further to this, personal protective equipment, such as gloves, helmet and safety glasses. Note, however, at times you may need to use a combination of controls to manage the risks. The last step is to review the effectiveness of the control measures that have been implemented to ensure they are working as planned. Effective workplace health and safety management requires a PCBU to ensure it consults with workers and others about issues which may affect their health and safety. It's important to ensure you talk to workers regarding aspects of your business that may affect their health and safety. You also need to talk to others, such as residential homeowners, other businesses, subcontractors, and clients regarding aspects of your operation which may affect them. For example, felling a tree on the boundary of a residential property, lifting a load with a crane, or closing a street. Having a process in place to allow workers to inform the business of health and safety issues, and also allowing the business to inform workers about hazards and risks that affect their health and safety, best helps a business manage the risk. Consultation should be documented, and this can be done by simply using a Toolbox Talk form. This form is located in the Resource tab, along with other forms which you might find useful in your business. Let's have a look at some examples of identifying hazards and eliminating or minimising the risks so far as is reasonably practicable. In this image, pedestrians are likely to walk down this driveway towards the drop zone of the tree being removed. The hazard being pedestrians cannot be eliminated. However, the risk can be minimised, as you can see, by way of implementing physical fixed barrier to prevent the pedestrians accessing the work area, creating an exclusion zone. Further to this, you could also appoint a spotter. Prior to work commencing, it's important that all plant and equipment is checked to ensure it's in an operational condition as per the manufacturer's instruction. Information, training and instruction must be provided to workers on all aspects of the PCBU's activities, including the safe use of the plant and equipment, and this should be provided by a competent person in accordance with the manufacturer's guidelines or the guideline of the competent person. The nature of tree work in all aspects, from groundwork to climbing, requires workers to undertake manual hazardous tasks. This is also commonly known as manual handling. When managing the risks of these tasks, it's important to use suitable mechanical lifting aids where reasonably practical to do so. Where this is not reasonably practical, systems of work need to be in place to ensure workers who undertake these tasks are not being placed at a risk of harm. For example, a system of work could be the worker firstly assesses the load to ensure they can handle the load within their own capacity. If they cannot, they could cut the timber smaller or use a two-person lift. Information, training and instruction must also be provided to workers in relation to hazardous manual tasks. You must have an emergency plan and procedures in place to deal with any emergency in the event one arises. It's important to ensure that you provide and train workers in these procedures and the equipment provided is appropriate for the types of emergencies at the workplace. The emergency plan and procedures must also be tested frequently. You must also ensure you provide access to first aid and ensure an adequate number of workers are trained in first aid. The Work Health and Safety Regulation, New South Wales, Clause 221 allows for a person to be placed into a tree by lifting or suspending the person in a harness with a crane if a risk assessment has been conducted and shows that using the crane access method to place the person into the tree to carry out tree lopping does not place the person at a greater risk of harm than using plants specifically designed to lift a person or climbing the tree. The types of things you should consider are the tree's overall structure, whether the site can accommodate the use of other plant, such as an EWP, whether the site can accommodate the use of manual or controlled tree felling techniques. If the worker is placed into the tree by the crane, can the tree structure support them once they attach to the tree, then detach from the crane? This work can only be carried out by a tree climber competent in the crane access method and a competent crane operator. Consideration needs to be given to how the climber attaches to the crane and also how they intend to communicate with the operator. When assessing or planning works, a visual tree assessment should be conducted by a competent person to identify any potential structural faults or weaknesses within the tree structure. Look at its condition for decay, bark inclusions, signs of root plate failure, storm damage, or is the tree dead? Following assessing the tree structure, you must identify the types of hazards on site which could cause harm. These may include, is the site level or on a slope? Are there any electrical, traffic, or pedestrian issues? Are there any targets surrounding the tree? Can the tree be felled safely? Can the tree be accessed by an elevated work platform? Does a climber need to climb the tree? Or can the tree be accessed using the crane access method? Tree work is diverse in terms of hazards and the risks that present to workers, with many on-site factors changing prior to the arrival of work crews. From conducting a visual tree inspection and site inspection, this information creates topics for consultation with workers prior to commencing work at the site. Following the information gained during the visual tree assessment and site inspection, an appropriate work method should be developed. Consideration should be given to working from ground level where possible. If you can't work from ground level, assess the risks and consider other work methods such as using an elevated work platform, climbing the tree, or using the crane access method. A person competent and experienced in tree work should be the person who determines the appropriate method of work. However, this does not mean this is the only method of work, and consultation with workers and other parties involved, such as subcontractors, should occur prior to the work method being undertaken on site, in the event there are issues with the proposed method. Once the work method has been selected, consideration needs to be given to the workers engaged to undertake the task. Toolbox talks are a useful tool prior to the commencement of work to ensure all workers on site know their roles, where the exclusion zones are, what are the systems of work being used, and how will a rescue be conducted in the event of an emergency. By ensuring you document decisions made in regards to hazards, risks, and controls, and how consultation has occurred in relation to the work, this can assist with creating a system of work and also demonstrating a commitment to work health and safety. This is to help ensure all persons involved in the work are aware of what could harm them and how the risks of harm are being controlled. The documentation does not have to be exhaustive. However, best practice is to document the risk assessment and conduct a documented toolbox talk prior to commencing work. Did you know if you have a business, you may require a workers' compensation policy? If you are a proprietary limited business, if you have employees, if you have contractors, and if you believe you pay wages over $7,500 within a financial year, you may need a workers' compensation insurance policy. If an injury does occur, you must notify your insurer of the injury within 48 hours. You must participate in the development of the workers' injury management plan written by your insurer and comply with obligations imposed on you in the plan. You must provide suitable employment as far as reasonably practicable where a worker is able to return to work either on a full-time or part-time basis. Some of these suitable employment tasks could be quoting, maintaining plant and equipment, reviewing documents, or safety observing. The suitable employment provided, so far as reasonably practicable, must be the same as or equivalent to the work the worker was performing at the time of the injury. You must, in consultation with the worker, doctor, and insurer, establish and implement a return to work plan for each worker. Work is good for us. It is therapeutic, it improves recovery time, reduces pain symptoms, and helps workers return to their usual activities sooner. From today's webinar, Safe Work New South Wales would like you to remember the following key messages. Remember to plan the job, to conduct a visual inspection of the tree, to inspect the site to identify any hazards, and to decide on an appropriate work method. Remember to think about your workers and others who may be affected by the work. Remember to make sure that workers are trained and competent, that a system of work is in place, that a rescue plan has been developed, and that consultation has occurred with your workers and others affected by your work. Remember to document and discuss. To document the discussions held with workers about the hazards and risks, and to document and discuss the controls implemented. Remember to reconsider the controls implemented in the event there are changes in the site, that the work method needs to be changed, or that the weather conditions change. Well, that's it for the webinar today. Thank you.
Finally, although all care has been taken to ensure that the information in this webinar is correct at the time of publication, the laws do change over time, and you need to ensure that you are accessing the most current legislation to ensure that the information is up to date. The information contained in this presentation is provided as a guide and does not necessarily represent the views of Safe Work New South Wales. This webinar is for educational and development purposes only. Thank you for watching this Safe Work New South Wales webinar.